All right. So, welcome to a new episode of Data Disruptors. And today we have a really special guest here. We have Karl Smolka, who is the MD of Data Platforms and Analytics at TD Securities. And maybe before we get started, Karl, thanks for joining us. Can you give us a little bit of background on TD and TD Securities as well?
Yeah, good morning. Happy Friday, first of all. It's
Happy Friday.
TGFI, so we got there. Okay, yeah, TD. So TD Bank, Toronto Dominion. So for anyone who's been downtown in Toronto, will probably be fairly familiar with the big green logo. Um, yeah, we have buildings all over downtown Toronto, but yeah, we're the Toronto Bank. And we are a global bank and pretty standard bank really. We are, as I say, pretty typically Canadian, um, generally seen as a sort of safe pair of hands. Got a very strong balance sheet, which we use a lot to our advantage. Fairly risk adverse, and like all banks, we have all different aspects, all different lines of businesses. Myself, I come from the cap markets or the sort of investment side of the bank. But yeah, it's a big brand in sort of North America, and a lot of our sort of strategy recently has been around expansion into the US. So sort of Boston, sort of the Eastern Seaboard, really, we have a pretty strong presence. So
Mhm.
depends where people are listening from. We may be a household name, or we might not be. Depends where you are, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over New York, right? Like every time I live in the West Coast in Mountain View, California, but every time I'm visiting New York, you see those green signs all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, we got some. Obviously, we're continuing to expand in the US, and I think we've got. I think we're starting to make some early plans about sort of actually opening some branches in Europe. I'm not involved with that, but yeah, I think it's a big brand. Yeah, like I say, I think it's and we are growing. So I think I forget where we are in the sort of league tables in terms of size and asset under management, that sort of stuff. But I think for the investment side of things, I think it depends on which metric you use. I think we're sort of 14, 15, that sort of ballpark in terms of in
Okay,
terms of size. But yeah, in terms of assets under management, I know that we've got 1.9 trillion. I know that much. So yeah,
so
it's
that's a lot of money. I remember back in the financial crisis. Do you remember that there was the too big to fail, right? That was one of the lessons. So are you guys in that category of too big to fail now, or
yeah.
not
I
quite yet?
forget. So for those not in finance, we are now we are classified as a GSIP. So we are of sort of globally systemic importance now. So yeah, we're deemed too big to fail, and that in itself brings a lot of challenges, right? We have a duty, a fiduciary duty to our sort of clients, communities, etc. Yeah, it's not the same as working in a startup. Let's say it that way. It's a very different culture. It's a very different technical problem as well. It's not the same sort of same work environment. Let's put it that way.
All right, so don't fail. I think that's the
Yeah, we're trying not to. Yeah, I
the
think
key here.
we're a pretty safe pair of hands. But yeah, I guess we'll talk more about it. But you know, it influences your strategy and the way you attack tech. You know, I think a lot of people within our industry. So sometimes you hear people sort of talking about, are we a bank with a software shop, or are we a software shop with a bank on the side?
Yeah,
My my opinion is we're a bank with software inside. That's the way I sort of look at things. But
yeah.
I guess, yeah, everyone has a slightly different opinion on that.
Okay, cool. And so when you think about kind of your role within TD, can you talk a little bit about kind of where you sit within the organization, what you're responsible for?
Yeah, sure. So, like I say, so I'm on the cap markets side of things. So TD Securities specifically. So,
Hmm.
um, just to give you an idea of size, I think the technology team within, well, last time I checked with the CIO, it's around 1,500, maybe slightly bigger
Okay.
now, but we are growing. But my mandate specifically is I'm the MD that looks after the data platform, or data platform and analytics is the official title. So yeah, so really the role. I mean, I've been in the seat for about, I think it's coming up to 2 years. And if we, obviously I'm a techie, but if you zoom out far enough, really the mandate is to just drive that sort of data first culture within the org. We want we don't want well we want, but we also need to become more data driven as an organization.
Yeah. No, I think, especially now, like companies in every single industry, in the last, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, ever since ChatGPT came out, really. I think even folks that weren't thinking about, data are now kind of really seeing it front and center. Oh my God, this is going to disrupt everything in our business, right? From like how our customers interact with us to, how we can derive insights from unstructured information. Just so much going on now. And I think just having data be ready for any kind of analysis, right, is probably important for
Yeah, I
every
saw an
company.
amazing slide recently, actually put together by another vendor, and they'd taken an index of data companies, or of publicly traded data companies, and they'd plotted that against the point where ChatGPT came out, and the inflection point is so clear. It was a fantastic slide. I'll have to see if I can send that to you. But that really was an inflection point, wasn't it? That coming out, that just it changed the thinking, and you know really put a rocket
Yeah.
up things when it comes to data as a subject by itself.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my own personal work, just kind of day to day. I have the subscription for multiple now. Using ChatGPT, 4.0, using Claude, and just using it for everything I do, really. So I can only imagine, like, within a bank or any company your size, there's so much disruption, so much opportunity, really, with all these things. But I
Yeah, it's
mean,
obviously coming. We're incredibly, being a GSIP, where the regulations is very very tight. So
yeah,
yeah, I thought we'd get further into the podcast before we talked about AI, but yeah,
I know.
it's it's not ingrained in my everyday life yet. Let's put it that way. We
Yeah, yeah.
being too big to fail. It's an interesting space, but it's actually a little bit of a turn off for me at the moment. Actually, I'm
Okay.
when it comes to priorities for me, I'm thinking about the precursor, right? The Achilles heel of AI is data,
Yeah.
and I want to get us in a position where we're ready to adopt it once we work out the regulation, we work out the governance, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, if you look at it, I've seen so many instances where it just makes stuff up, right? So unless you have like a really strong data foundation that you can kind of use it to, anchor, the AI, right? It's just not going to work well, especially in an industry like financial services, where you have to be right. And so, whether that's, you get more stuff into the context through RAG, or just, increasingly longer context windows. I think um, it's going to drive every single company to really have a solid foundation, right? We talk a lot about kind of the lake house as the architecture for managing an organization's data, right? Centralizing as much as you can, having it under control, and an open architecture where you can really apply lots of different tools and technologies to that data. Um,
yeah. I look at it as a maturity curve. I think you're not going to democratize your AI if you can't democratize your data first as well, and
exactly.
get some of those, yeah. And I think the loop we're in at the moment is a lot of people are getting stuck on that, democratization of data
Yeah.
internally, and you know, it's a pretty clear path about how to get there, but it's the execution that's the hard bit.
Yeah. So talk about your journey, and I know you've been really focused on change management at TD Securities. So what does that journey look like? Where did you start? What have you kind of accomplished so far, and just talk a little bit about that kind of
Yeah,
perspective.
sure. So coming in the seat is obviously on the tech side of this, and the way that we've structured internally is, I think I always knew that good software was about people as much as the tech as well.
Hmm.
My background is I was an average developer at best. Did a bit in the trading space, and I soon sort of realised that I was probably slightly more suited towards the management sort of stream of things than the actual coding. So they took my keyboard away. Um, but yeah, I was surprised about when we got into the role about how much of the role is about is about change management, is about driving a culture of data. And the tech is important, but it really is 80% plus about people, processes. And I know that sounds a little bit of a tagline at times, and then the tech falls into place. But I mean, we've within our sort of wider team, we've got a pretty we were pretty ahead of the curve when it came to sort of technologies, and especially distribution of sort of operational workloads and sort of lowish latency in data in the firm. But what we found was that over the last couple of years is that we got to the point where, to use an analogy, that the pipes were pretty good, in terms of the tech, but the water running through those pipes wasn't as good as it should be. So we had to sort of almost circle back a little bit and say, right, let's put more of the focus on the data, or just as much of the focus on the data as you do the actual technology itself. So that's when I think, I don't know the exact dates. I think every big organization now has a data office. But for me, probably about 2-3 years ago, that's when it became a sort of joint partnership with the data office internally. So everything I do now is sort of hand in hand with our partners in the data office that sort of make up that business, or parts, it depends which way you look at it, the business side of data as much as the actual tech. So we've got a good thing going there.
So what's their responsibility, the data office versus like your
Yeah,
organization?
well, we have some sort of central standards across the whole organisation that we have to adhere to.
Okay.
But as a data officer, I really sort of see them as the sort of partner in crime when it comes to data strategy. They help define the strategy, the governance strategy, that sort of side. And then obviously that overlays with the technology. And so maybe to give a slightly more practical example, they will help prioritize and determine which initiatives, where should we be spending our money when it comes to our data strategy. How do we attack this? Which bits go first? What are the priority use cases? That sort of stuff. So, so yeah, everything we do sort of hand in hand with those guys now, and we've got a good thing going there.
Okay. Well, what's an example of like when you say like a part of that strategy? Is it we should enable self-service for all our data and figure out how to do that, or is it more hey, we got to develop more intelligence around social media information for purposes of trading?
Yeah. Well, for us, I think the key starting point for us is accessibility of data,
Yeah.
and the organization's grown organically through acquisition, and prior to sort of the advent of cloud, like every organization, we have a huge number of data silos across our organization. I forget, I do have some stats somewhere about the number of, call it data marts or data warehouses, effectively databases that we have across the technology estate, and it's a huge number.
Yeah.
And the first challenge that people face is just getting their hands on that data. Right. Sometimes there's obviously we have to have controls in place, especially if there's sort of personal PII data, personally identifiable information. So you can imagine as a business user, if you're trying to produce a report, I don't know, if you're the head of trading, for example, and you want to report about, in a timely manner about all of the business we've done with clients across all of the different trading desks. If getting a hold of that data is a problem, it's basically going to be stale by the time you get it. And we're not even talking about the quality of data right now. So for us, really sort of just cracking open those data silos and making that data accessible to people, regardless of how good it is, so that people can get their hands on it. If you can get your hands on it, you get it out of the open, people can play with it, and you can discover data quality issues. And that's where, we've started using some of the more modern technologies. And Dremio, as you well know, is part of that equation for us as part of our sort of fabric strategy. But yeah, that for me is step number one. It's not the end game, it's not the full strategy here. But if you can let people get their hands on data, and do that in an experience that is not too arduous. You shouldn't have to chase down access and plead with people to get access to data. And there's nothing more frustrating than you've got a key project come along and they say, right, we need this data, we need you to write custom extract, and you then get into a whole cycle around prioritization, resources, and all that sort of stuff, and it burns so many calories. So For us, that experience is just key. How do you get that self-service out there so that I can get off of the critical path? I'm bored of having to have conversations around prioritization. I want to get me off the critical path and really sort of democratize the self-service and experience so that people can just help themselves
Yeah.
to data.
So the challenge more like getting the person to have access to these different databases? Is it more like, do they even know that data exists from a discoverability standpoint? Like, do they know where to even find
Yeah,
it?
I mean,
It's two different.
discoverability and knowing what's out there is a challenge as well. I talk about people having to go fishing for data.
Yeah.
Especially people that are new to the organization, they just don't know
Yeah.
where to go to start with. So yes, sort of discovery of data
Hmm.
is a problem. You will get there eventually. You can get around that by talking to people, but it is one of those barriers to sort of self-service adoption that we do have.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So once you have the data accessible through whatever platform, maybe Dremio in this case, but like could be anything, right? Like you still have these challenges though, right? Like how do you know the data exists? How do you find it? All the tribal knowledge. I think that's what you're referring to in terms of talking to people, right? Is there a good way to solve that? Like, how do you go about making it so that a new person joins the firm, they can be productive within a short amount of time?
Yeah, yeah. So for us, solving it once you've solved the accessibility problem, I think it then becomes a quality. Or
Hmm.
one of the next problems is quality of data. So okay, someone's come to the organization, they've managed to get hold of, trade data, for example, the trades that we're doing with our institutional clients.
Yeah.
I think first question is, can they trust it? Is it a single source of truth? At times, the answer is probably no, and I think that's probably the case across a lot of places. I mean,
Yeah.
so can you trust it?
Don't know.
And you don't know, maybe. Yeah, this is what we're trying to change, and I think
Hmm.
so. Quality is obviously a huge aspect to that. I think and what we saw in the past is how modeling really plays a part in this. So okay, you got access to it, and maybe you can trust it, but is it in a format that is conducive to your use case?
Hmm.
Can someone just take that data and run with it? Can they pull it into Power BI, Tableau, and generate some insights? Or are they having to take that data, augment it, change it, process it, override some of it to get it into a format that is just conducive to their business case? And I think one of the focuses of the CDO that I talked about with our data office is modeling data in a way that it covers that 80% of use cases, fit for purpose versus fit for use. We're trying to produce a quality data set, take into some of the sort of modern concepts of domain orientation, have a domain owner, have the business owners associated with that data set, have the quality
Hmm.
procedures and the sort of 4A's checks in place, but then model it in a way that most people can use it as well.
Hmm.
I think if you look at the workloads that we have running on our platforms, you can largely break them down by operational. So by operational, I mean data flows in, we do a bunch of trades, and for example, maybe we need to then just produce a report and send that off to a regulator every single day.
Yeah.
But then we also have people doing analytics on the platform, you know, going in there looking for insights, that sort of stuff. So how can we produce data in a way that is sort of modeled correctly, that can be sort of used in a whole variety of different use cases without having to become, I think, what you guys call an accidental data engineer. So,
Yeah. And so who does this work? Like who's doing this data modeling now? You talked about like domain owners. Are you personally, I mean, or your team, are you recruiting these different business owners to come participate in this new strategy of like having domain owners and taking responsibility for different data sets so you can have these
yeah,
different.
exactly. Yeah. So it's like I say, it's a partnership with our friends in the data office, and part of that process is establishing what are the domains of data that we need within the organization, and for us it's pretty simple, right? The bread and butter of cat markets is trade data, market data, reference data, pre-trade data, that sort of stuff. It's nothing that it's not a secret source. But then what we do is we go out, we say, right, what are the different roles and the personas and the people, what are the different responsibilities that come with managing a data set and ensuring quality?
Yeah.
And that's not just tech. It's not just about the tech. It's about the governance and the sort of processes that sort of sit around that ecosystem.
Yeah. What about the users of this data? When you start thinking about like self-service, like who are they? Are they people that know how to write SQL? Are they, just folks in finance and, in marketing and, you know, product managers, those types of folks that are just needing to answer questions?
Yeah, everyone,
Where
I think, is the answer.
yeah,
And one of the interesting things about cap markets is, I have traders that are probably better at coding than me,
yeah,
incredibly technically literate. Um, but at the same time, I also have a whole bunch of users that would probably struggle to use a pivot table at times as well.
yeah,
So one of the things we've been doing is when we sort of start thinking about egress out of the platform is, you know, okay, tools like SQL are incredibly pervasive, but I don't think it's the only tool you need for getting data out of your platform. So we have a whole suite of sort of egress patterns ranging from streaming data patterns. Um,
hmm
we're a big partner with Confluent.
hmm
Um, we have some inbuilt technologies that are sort of self-service, more like pivot tables on steroids, and then SQL for operational analytical, Redis caches, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it really there's a whole spectrum of users, and they come with a whole different sort of levels of technical literacy. And I think the key is if you're going to democratize, and actually saw this recently on uh, some big keynotes, is you have to cater for that spectrum.
hmm
That's very much part of our strategy.
And I think also, one of the things I've learned is you got to make it easy for them, right? Like you think about self service. I mean, in anything, right? You go to self service checkout at a grocery store, at Costco, and I go there myself. I have 4 kids, right? So even if I'm just buying 2 things, I'm going to Costco, right? Just spending $100 on steaks or whatever for lunch. Um, but you go to the self service checkout. I have 2 things. That's fine. But it's too complicated. When you have hundreds of things. I just don't have that same experience that maybe the cashier has, right? So it's like, start putting things on the other side, and then there's not enough space for it, and then it starts beeping at me that I'm trying to cheat the system. It's
Yeah,
just like whatever.
exactly. That experience. I mean, if you're going to democratize, and I mean, working in an industry that is heavily regulated, we as we said at the start, we're too big to fail. We can't. We've got to control our data. The tendency is that we could very easily wrap this data platform in processing procedures that are too manual, that get in the way.
Yeah,
We have to look for sort of creative ways to stay inside that control framework, obviously, to make that experience as good as possible for people. Like whether that's ingesting data, getting access to the platform, getting data out of the platform, curating data, whatever that may be, um, it needs to be as smooth as it possibly can be with the appropriate level of governance depending on what data you're looking at.
yeah,
If you're looking at credit card data, there needs to be a lot of checks on that data, for example. I'm not in that space, generally speaking. Yeah, so one of the things that we've done on our side is, and I think if I had my time again, I'd actually do more of it, is employing people to think specifically about that experience.
hmm
I've actually got people in my team that are dedicated to that function now. You know, I was given the choice: do you want more developers or do you want people to talk about the experience? And I said no. I said we need to get the experience nailed down.
yeah,
Because I think the tendency is that sometimes as techies we can be slightly removed from the people that are using the products on the front lines.
yeah.
You got to put yourself in their shoes and think about what it looks like their end.
So it sounds like you've created these, or you're working on creating these data products, and do you have documentation for all these different data sets so that folks that come in, they know what each data set represents, what different columns represent, how to use it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the dream. It depends which piece of data
Yeah,
you're talking about. We're fairly, like I think everyone is really, talking
yeah,
to all my peers in the industry. We're still fairly on in this data product journey, and I think what comes with, I think if you were to sit down the average executive or super exec in the front office and say what is a data product, they're not really going to know. This is In fact, let me just go off on a tangent. I remember when we presented our sort of the first cut of our data strategy internally to the chief operating officer,
Mhm.
and his first comment was, "This is a little bit esoteric." He got it, but he was right. Um, it's true, right? I mean, I do need to get some t-shirts made around what a data product is, but yeah, the literacy side and actually getting people up to scratch on some of these terms that are still fairly new. When did the term for mesh? When did that? I should know this. When did it come about? Who started it?
I think it's actually a consulting company. And this woman who works there, her name is Zamak Dagani, who I've worked with close over the years, actually. And so she, wrote some blog posts about this concept of data mesh, and data products was part of that. And I think that kind of, I feel like that really caught on, at least for a while. And I think specific elements of it have kind of maybe now taken kind of center stage, right? Whereas people maybe talk less about data mesh as a concept. I think it's, there's just too much there, is too abstract. But I think this idea of the data product, really just like best practices around how do you manage data, and how do you, bring the business closer to, managing it, ensuring quality, making it accessible, just a set of kind of, I'd say, common practices and, best
And
practices.
mindset. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
it's rocket science, but like you said earlier, people. It's a lot of it is the people, right? How do you get to a point where everything is documented? You have the controls in place. Things are, tracked on when they're refreshed. What's the quality? All these things are. Yeah, I don't think it's rocket science, but it's just really hard to implement in, a large organization, right? And to drive that change.
Yeah, like you say, it sounds once you get it, it sounds very simple. But if I wind back 5 years, I wasn't talking about this stuff, and
Yeah,
most, I was tech, you know,
yeah,
lens to everything. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, yeah, these things,
So did you end up convincing the COO, or did you not have to?
Well,
For
we
this?
got some funding. Yeah, we're a going concern. So yeah, we we got it going, and the data literacy bit of it's hard. It really is, and that was surprising. And I remember years ago, I remember seeing a tweet. I can't remember who it was from that said, if you're sick and tired of repeating your strategy, you're getting to the point where it's only just starting to sink in. And it's true.
Yeah,
You have to repeat, repeat, repeat. And yeah, that for us, that's been a challenge. I mean, we've been lucky because the sort of two SVPs that sort of are involved in this have been, they've been very good at sort of breaking this down into sort of vernacular that the front office and the executive MDs can understand. So yeah, but yeah, don't underestimate it, the literacy side of it. And it's still, that's an ongoing thing. That's a
yeah,
stream in its own right.
yeah. Well, is the hope that you go hire somebody new, they join the firm, and then you know they can start taking advantage of data within a week? Is that kind of
I mean, that's the
the holy
dream.
grail?
Yeah, yeah. Just come in. You shouldn't have to. They shouldn't even know who I am. I should just be the guy in tech that
Yeah,
makes that data available. So yeah, how like I say, with that experience, how can you make that experience as frictionless as possible? But
yeah,
obviously, staying within the bounds of the control framework that we're going to have to adhere to.
sure. And then what, like, we've talked about kind of the data side of things, the people. What about the infrastructure for this, the platforms, are you running this in the cloud? Are you multi-cloud? What does that look like?
It's a bit of everything for us. So I think I think the reality, and I think I can probably speak to a good chunk of investment banks now. We still have a large footprint of for the actual sort of trading on the actual trading side of things, or vendor platforms. The
Yeah,
likes of the Murexes, the Ions, and they're still evolving. They're not really a cloud first type setup yet. And naturally, we have to have, for some purposes, processes that are effectively co-located with those vendor products. So we're in a situation right now where for years we've been a big Azure shop, and the roadmap of how we adopt Azure has been growing pretty steadily. Um, but in recent years, the what we're seeing from the regulators is that the regulators are starting to say, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket."
Hmm.
I haven't actually seen it written down by a regulator yet, but um, I think the way it sort of works in the industry is you get sort of pre-warning, and it's coming if it hasn't already come.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's public knowledge. We signed a deal with GCP with Google fairly recently.
Okay.
Still very much in its infancy, that program, but yeah, we're done with them. We've got certain parts of the bank have got workloads on GCP, but for me, the multi-cloud journey is only just beginning as well.
Okay. Is it too
So
early
yeah,
to say kind of the benefits, pros and cons of
well,
Azure
it's
versus
interesting, right? As far as I understand it, the motivation for this was obviously risk avoidance, right? Not putting all your eggs into if there's one
yeah
outage on Azure, the whole bank goes down. But it's a funny place to be in because in reality, multi-cloud, as far as I can tell, is it's adding a huge amount of complexity to the mix.
yeah
Taking one web app and running it in two places, maybe that's not so complicated. But when you've got a sprawling ecosystem of sort of operational data that's ticking and flying around all over the place with latency concerns. Yeah, to this day, I'm spending a fair bit of time with the partners at Google and their partners to work out, if we're going to be really successful in multi-cloud, what are some of the changes we need to make to our systems today? And I sort of underpinning that, it's a big data movement problem.
yeah
Like you know, obviously my team looks after the sort of, I think we call it the data backbone within TD Securities, and we know data has gravity. People need that data. So
yeah
I'm sort of working on the assumption that if we're going to be successful in multi-cloud, I need to make that data sort of locally available in on-prem, primary, and secondary cloud providers as well. So
mm,
yeah, it's early days, but the data movement problem is,
yeah
and how we do that effectively is going to be an
yeah.
interesting
Well,
journey.
at least I think from a cost standpoint, I think the transfer costs have been that that problem maybe has been alleviated recently. When kind of the egress costs have been kind of slashed and
Why
all
are you
that.
saying that? Just because of the pricing models on the cloud?
Yeah, I think they've made it like inexpensive or free in some cases, the data egress, whereas it used to be like very prohibitive to actually get data out of these clouds.
Yeah,
So, but the latency is still there. The tool set's different in each of these, right? So, you know, and I'm not just talking about like the obviously the higher level tools, right? Microsoft's BI and data warehouse, for example, or with Power BI and like Fabric, right? And Synapse before that, and Google has Looker and BigQuery, and those services are very different. But even when you get to kind of things that in theory are more similar, right? Kubernetes, each of them manages it differently, and it's not trivial to manage these things. It just adds a lot of work, but obviously I get the risk avoidance, and of course when things become regulation, then hey, then it doesn't even matter. You got to do it.
yeah, it's going to be interesting. And you just tell me what you think, because what is this going to mean for, like, let's say we use some, we're storing data in open file formats. So getting the
Yeah,
data moved is one thing, but I don't want to be running, database X from company X over here and database Y from company Y over here. I don't want to be managing 10 different sort of native.
yeah,
Um, so is that going to push people more down the, call it open source or
yeah. I mean, I think that's a
cloud
big
agnostic?
yeah. I think there's two levels in that, right? There's first of all, a lot of companies, that's why they prefer to use technologies that are kind of cloud agnostic, right? So take Dremio, you can run it on Azure, on GCP, on AWS. Unlike many others, you can actually run it on prem as well. And so you have the same technology works everywhere, and that means users don't have to learn different things. The folks that are managing it don't have to learn different things and manage things differently. But I think beyond just kind of the portability from a cloud standpoint, you also have kind of the desire to have data in more open formats, and that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, right, is the shift from proprietary data warehouses, even cloud data warehouses, to let's put the data in an open format like Iceberg. There was even a war there between two open formats. I'd say Iceberg and Delta Lake. Iceberg kind of ended up winning that battle, and like at least that means that the industry now is standardized on kind of an open format, right? We're pushing now an open catalog as well, right? Like with Apache Polaris, to really continue that trend towards, okay, all your data should be open so that you can access it from a variety of tools for different use cases. We talked earlier at the beginning about a little bit about AI, but even SQL, right? You got Dremio for analytics. You got DuckDB if you're building some app and you need some low latency access to data. I mean, there's just so many different tools that people want to use with data. And once we've gotten to this point of like an open standard, it just makes everything a lot easier. And you also don't have to worry about, okay, I'm gonna have to transition again tomorrow because you know we're gonna have a new executive come in and they're gonna say, you know what, like I have a relationship with Amazon, and so forget GCP, forget Azure. We're going to Amazon. Let's use I don't know, Redshift or Athena or something else, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, it feels like a race to the middle to me for some of these companies. Like the,
yeah,
you know, you know, I is there going to be a feature on BigQuery or data warehouse or whatever, or on Synapse that means I have to use that product going for? I don't know. I'm not convinced. We'll see. So
yeah,
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the big cloud providers sort of adopt that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
To their credit, they have been adding, at least on the open format side of things, they have been, I think all of them really adding support for, being able to process data in Iceberg format, right? At the end of the day, customers were pushing them to that, and I think that's kind of the trend that you're seeing.
yeah,
But certainly this whole kind of multi-cloud and then also hybrid cloud, where a lot of companies, have things that they want to do on-prem. Maybe it's for legacy reasons, they still have a lot of data there. Sometimes it's cost reasons, they want to run some workloads. I was talking to some security companies recently, actually moving from cloud to kind of on-prem S3 compatible storage. And so that certainly helps companies, like us, for example, right, where you have flexibility to run in these different places. But yeah, super interesting. Yeah,
yeah. The catalog space is another one that I haven't quite got my head around it yet.
I think we got to
Feels like,
standardize there.
yeah,
I think for this vision of open data to work, right? We started with like open formats. Actually, you go back 30 years, right? The CSV file was maybe the first open format, very limited, um, but then I'd say, I don't know, 15 years ago, like 10 years ago, Parquet was an open format that kind of
yeah,
the industry kind of agreed on, and it was fast enough for analytics. It continues to evolve, by the way. Like we're working on adding things like the variant type to Parquet, so you can get really fast JSON access right now. So all sorts of things there, but that wasn't enough. We needed a better open kind of abstraction of really a table, right? And that's what Iceberg became. But really, to have kind of a data platform, that's not enough. You need this kind of meta store, right? This technical catalog that maintains, okay, what tables do I have, where are they located, all that kind of information, who are the users in the company. And that's the role of this technical catalog. And we're really hoping that as an industry we can standardize there as well. And that was the kind of the motivation for us to partner with Snowflake, um, and others, and really drive this idea of like, let's create an Apache project for an open catalog. And so that's going to be Apache
yeah. It's
Polaris.
been interesting to see even within the short space of time that I've been in the role, the sort of change in attitude from some of the big players in the market. They've gone
Yeah,
from "this is us" to "oh, okay, we need to play nicely now." It's in their benefit as much as everyone else is. You know, it's as much their benefit
yeah,
as others as well. So
yeah,
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 I don't think we're quite there yet, but and how the likes of sort of the true enterprise catalogs, sort of the Calibras of this world, how they fit into that. Yeah, TBD on that one. I think we'll be that'll be the topic of much discussion. I think over the next year or so.
yeah. I think this is all getting even more interesting now with the drive towards kind of AI and what's been enabled by LLMs, as we talked about in the beginning, right? The need to have this like platform that you can have your data be ready for AI whether it's go index it in a vector, and create embeddings and use it for RAG, or whether it's just to fine tune a model, or
Yeah,
whatever the use case
I
is.
think there's the doomsday sort of approach to this is that you don't have a choice. I mean, in a few years' time, this is going to be table stakes.
Yeah,
This isn't. If you don't adopt to this stuff, I think you're gonna be left behind pretty quickly. So yeah,
you're gonna be taken over by an AI robot, maybe.
maybe, maybe.
I'm less convinced of that. I was recently working on, just for fun, doing some code. I hadn't done coding in such a long time, like more
I
than
was going to say
15
to
years.
you, when was the last time you actually wrote some code?
Okay, so I was actually building an app, kind of just for fun, right? And I used ChatGPT to actually produce things, and it was amazing. I was able to create all these services on GCP, um, super quick. Like one
No.
container that's like listening for news on Telegram channels, another container that was um, doing something else using Google Cloud Run functions, and it's just so easy now, right? Like it's like you have this amazing developer sitting next to you, and by the way, they make mistakes, so they're not great at you know like at algorithms, for example, right? They'll give you something that doesn't really work, and they're like, I don't think that's right, and then it's like, oh, you're right, we should go through the array from the end to the beginning. And I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that's closer, but no, that's not going to work in some cases too. I'm like, no, really, the answer is you got to build this tree in memory, and like it couldn't figure that out. So I'm not
Yeah,
convinced it's replacing us. Like I think it's
not anytime soon, but I think it'll get you
uh,
sort of 65% of the way there, right? It gets you going pretty
yeah,
quickly, like you say, right? For our
it'll
students
be
setting
like
up,
self-driving cars. I think like I was at. I remember being at a water polo game for my daughter a few years ago in high school, and my older one, and one of the dads was working at this self-driving car company, and he was like, this is going to be solved within, I can't remember how much time, or maybe this was actually earlier, 10 years ago. They're like, this will be solved within the next few years, and it's like, here we are, I'm driving my car everywhere. So
do they have the sort of self driving cars that are in downtown San Fran? Have they made it out to Mountain View, or is it just in the core of downtown?
only San Francisco, and they've expanded, I think, to South San Francisco now. I heard they're good, they actually work, but
Yeah, I only
um,
saw them 2 years ago. I hadn't been to San Fran in years, and it blew my mind. Like, yeah, crazy.
yeah. So
Yeah,
we're getting there. Eventually, we get there, and I guess that's the big question is like, how long does it take to really get to AGI and get all the way there? But and then we don't
yeah.
have a job, but that's good. We'll just go skiing all day long, and
Well, there's the people side of it, right, and the process and all that sort of stuff, and you know, yeah, writing
you
the
don't think
code.
those Tesla robots are going to take over that part too?
Well, that may be a bit later. Probably not in my lifetime, but
Well, we'll see.
yeah,
You still look pretty young, so I think there's time.
well, I don't feel it. But
All right, so let's transition to our last piece here, which is actually kind of related to that. So, reflecting on your career, we got a lot of folks listening here. Maybe some are at the beginning of their careers. Um, what are some of the key learnings and things that have shaped your approach to kind of data and to leadership?
um, yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, I've worked in financial services all my life, which is it's a very sort of all of the roles that I've had have been very cap markets focused. But key learnings, I would say, just work out your own style.
Yeah,
Just because you've got a boss or a leader in your space, don't try and copy Steve Jobs because he's amazing. Work out what your style is,
yeah,
and don't take what consultants say as gospel as well. Like, I think we all sometimes fall into traps of, especially when you go to trade shows and conferences and stuff, of thinking everyone's doing this, this, and this. But learn your business. Everyone's different. Every organization has a different culture. That's important. So, have your own opinion. I think don't don't just don't just follow the crowd.
yeah.
Early in my career, I was a big fan of podcasts. I think I pretty much learned to code by listening to the Java Posse. Great, it's defunct now, but I think the web page is still up. But there was a couple of guys from Google, and I think Sun at the time, or was Sun at the time, I think, and a few others. That was a great podcast. A good blog as well. Joel on software. I still go back and read those blogs. I know he's
Joel
not
and
posting.
software. Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that one.
yeah, he's not posting much anymore. But there's a couple of articles I go back and read every now and then when I'm feeling down.
That's what you read when you're down.
Yeah, he's a great critic. I love it. Yeah, he's very outspoken, but yeah, really, some of that really resonates with me. Yeah, good blogs. For me, a big turning point in my career was relocating, moving from. You can probably tell from the accent. I'm a cynical Brit, but I'm sat here in Toronto. Yeah, funny story. I remember my boss at the time came in and he sat me down and he was how should we say, he was very New York, let's put it that way. And he said to me, is there any chance you'd consider moving to Toronto? And I said, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. And basically what I was saying was, yeah, if the conditions are right, I'll think about it. But in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, definitely. I knew this. I didn't even need to ask my wife if she wanted to. It should be game. And a couple of weeks later, we're sat in a bar, and he says, "It's a shame that you're not interested in going to Toronto." And I said, "That's exactly what I didn't say." And it was all due to those sort of, the slight communication differences and styles that between the regional differences and that sort of stuff. And I think working in different locations with different people from all around the world, that really helped. That really helped,
Yeah.
especially as you get more senior as well within a global organization. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that and look, just be empathetic. I think take a. I love that. I love that clip of Steve Jobs where he talks about taking a longer term view on people.
Hmm.
Get to know people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, this all very much resonates. I mean, I see it, in a smaller, much smaller company, right? All of these things, right? Even what you said at the beginning around every company is different, right? You hire somebody, and folks that are kind of come in and try to just apply a template. It often doesn't work, right? Because
yeah,
it's a different
exactly.
company. The
Yeah,
challenges are
yeah,
different. Just the people are
yeah,
different, right? How we work is different. So just come in there and listen, absorb, and then do bring the things you've learned, obviously, and there's a ton of opportunity to make things better, but you kind of have to apply it,
yeah,
based on the company that you're at now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, software is
Yeah,
complex, but people are more complex. So
whole lot. Those things are converging,
yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
as we talked about.
It's
Cool. What are some kind of emerging trends you're excited about, in terms of data or technology that hey, maybe we have some potential founders, or entrepreneurs on this, listening to this podcast. What's bothering you right
I'm not good at it. I'm not good at this bit. I'm not a I'm not a visionary. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we
but
should
you have some
probably.
challenges then. What are the main challenges that you're dealing
Yeah,
with?
well, I think a few things. Obviously, we've spoken about multi-cloud.
Yeah.
That's going to become the norm for many. I think.
Yeah.
AI. Obviously, we can talk about that all day. I think we touched on the catalog space as well. I see that standardizing data quality tools. Interesting there. I've not seen anything that's really blown me away yet.
Hmm.
I'd be
Yeah.
I'd be open to a small software shop disrupting that market a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to remember who's in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I think it's the likes of Informatica, those sort of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you tell me. I mean, you're the celebrity in this space. I mean, what's
Well, I mean, what you just talked about like data quality. It's funny. I was sitting down with just a friend, and he's an investor in Israel, and he was visiting kind of the Bay Area. We were having coffee earlier this week, and he made that kind of same point that if you think about software development, it's so much more like tight and organized and advanced in terms of the processes. And then you look at data, and it's like, even with all the tools and startups now, it's like it's a mess. It's a mess. It's like you're trying to catch something that's anomalies in some tables in your data warehouse, right? That's kind of data quality. And like we don't do that with software. We don't put in a bunch of shit into the
yeah,
repository and look for
yeah,
anomalies in the code to try to prevent you know
yeah.
bad things from happening. So you just think about that. I
That
think
sort of
just
product mindset. Yeah,
so yeah, just better processes around how do you create data, how do you how do you analyze it, just modernizing. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Certainly, AI introduces a lot of opportunities and new, I think, new challenges too. Right? You think about we talked about hallucinations a little bit, and you just can't use this thing in many use cases where correctness is accuracy is really important, right? Like if you can replace a, I don't know, maybe on support, customer service, or some sales roles or marketing where it's statistical anyway, right? Like most of the times you cold call people, they don't even answer the phone anyway, and when you do, maybe you're giving them your people aren't giving them the perfect answer anyway. So if AI does that, they just have to do it with better accuracy and it'll be fine, right? It doesn't have to be 100%, but there are use cases around finance and other things where if it's not accurate, it can be disastrous, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're
They call it responsible AI, and yeah,
yeah,
the governance. I've seen a lot of startups, actually, quite a few in Israel, actually, sort of just purely focusing on sort of visibility, responsible AI, and how
yeah,
you quantify that and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I'm not quite there yet in my journey, but I'm sure that will come in due course.
yeah. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it. We covered lots of different things. So, Karl Smolka, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great.
You're welcome, and thanks to you and your team for your ongoing partnership. Thank you.